you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm very good. Now, while you and I are having a quick chat, I'm going to let the good people join because it takes a while for them to get the little alerts and realise that we're live and,
Okay.
they're doing whatever they're doing and get the kids rushed off to bed and come and switch off Coronation Street and come and watch us instead. So,
Yeah.
uh, So how's it been? I mean, obviously you've got the place over in Fife, you've got the place in Glasgow. How's the weather been working for you lately? Has it been a September been a good month for production?
Aye, it's been good. Some sunny days and not quite as wet as it's been in previous years. So, it's been good. A bit of a challenge at the site in Five. You've been there, Steve, and you can see that I'm developing that. And at times when the earth's a bit wet, it just makes things a wee bit heavier to move around. I think
Right.
the last time you were here, there was a
It was
big
quite
pile of
dry.
manure and the wood chips. Aye, so a wee bit sludgy. But that's just the challenge of developing a site at this time of year. But no, nothing that we can't overcome.
That's good. Yeah, and we'll have a wee look at that little trip down to the place in Fife because I really enjoyed that and it was a nice wee video that we made
Ah, it's
that
good
day.
to have you.
And my wee daughter enjoyed it as well, and Jane had a good time. So, but that's a cracking spot with the wee cafe and all that there. It's absolutely brilliant. And
Aye,
when I saw that, Andy, I thought, hundreds of these up and down the UK. You know, thousands of them arguably, and each area should have two or three of them. You know,
yeah.
um, because if you look at you're saying in that one place you can feed 60 people, or you couldn't feed 60 people. It'd be enough fruit and veg for 60 people, really,
Aye,
wouldn't it? It
yeah.
wouldn't be enough food for them.
I know it would. It wouldn't be enough food for them. It's a veg box, so for an individual, it might be enough at a stretch. But no, the whole point is to provide people access to the organic foods. And no, I'm completely on board with what you've said with regards the necessity of more of these. I can see in a couple of your posts that you've put online that you refer to the fact that we used to produce a lot more of our own food, especially during wartime, during the Second World War. It was a necessity that we had to grow food. So it does feel at times that we're in a wartime situation, especially you'll have seen in the news recently the lack of access to fuel and things like that. The shelves themselves are becoming a bit emptier. So I completely agree with you. More than ever, we need to look at these type of projects and make sure that communities are resilient and have access to food. And even if they don't have access, the thing with the site in Fife, Steve, is that we can provide a certain amount of veg boxes, but the idea is that if people interact with the site and come there to learn how to grow themselves, then they take those skills home. And in Fife, there's a lot of growing space. There's a real heritage of growing food there through the centuries. So, the idea is to supply people food, but to give people the skills that they can do it for themselves as well.
Yeah, that's really good. And Andy, what we'll do is we'll maybe take a quick look at that video we did. So I'll
Aye,
put that
aye.
up and we'll have a quick chat about that because this is a video we did in Andy's site. It's a market garden. You call it, Andy? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. We'll have a wee look at this video and we'll just watch just a wee minute of it for the benefit of anybody who might not have seen it before. And I'll put the link to this in the comments section. It's a good video to watch. It's only half an hour long, and for anybody considering setting up something in the community, Andy's a good man to talk to. And this little site, I believe, is big enough and cost. Well, if you don't mind, Andy, we'll maybe talk about costs and what these kind of things. I know you're a fairly open and honest man, so just so that people can see that you don't need to have be sitting on a huge pot of gold to make this
Yeah.
happen. I know you're incredibly rich and it was all easy for you to do anyway, but no, but you've probably done this on a shoestring, Andy. But let's look at what we did here and how this little video worked out.
Of course.
Why is the sound not with that? Okay, 2 seconds, Andy, and I'll work the sound stop. Not working. I'll maybe just share the system audio. It's me. I think I didn't press the right button the last time. Okay, so we're back in the land of the living, and if there's any kind of justice at all in this world, can you hear it now?
Okay, we're here today with Andy McGovern to look at his amazing allotment. You call it an allotment?
Allotment, Market Garden, actually.
Market garden?
Aye.
We've got Jane here, Chief Gardener. She's learned a lot today. And we've got my daughter here. And we're just finding out how Andy set this up and how he manages to make it work, in the hope that other people throughout the UK can actually do similar things on a smaller, bigger scale, whatever suits hand be done. Andy, you reckon what, 60 boxes of veggies a week or something like that?
In this particular site, we'd be able to do 60 veg boxes per week, and then some cafes and restaurants on top of that as well.
Yeah.
So aye.
So food for plenty of families from one area, and profitable. You can make money at it, you can make a wage at it, and you're loving it.
Well, that's it. That was my intention with the business when I first started it. I remember when I started growing, I had a wee raised bed at Shettleston Growing Project, and I went round with all my seedlings, and I realised what time it was when the sun went down. You know, I had an absolutely thrilling experience, and I thought to myself that, hey, if I can make a living out of this, then I've cracked it, and this is the way it's going to turn out. So
look at it today, lovely sunny day, you're out here in the thick of it, at one with nature.
Yeah. No, it's
and
great.
I've not dug anything yet. I've done No, but it's really good. It's a lovely place you've got here, Andy, and it's all organic. So you know what you're eating.
That's it. You know exactly everything that's in the soil, and if
cutting out Tesco, cutting out Asda.
That's it. And if people come here and they become involved in the veg box scheme, you can come along the sessions during the week, and you can sow the food that you're going to grow. You get a lot of customers that want to come down early and learn how to harvest the food. They want to pick their own food.
Yeah.
So from seed to crop to plate, you can be part of that whole experience if you're part of the veg box scheme. So there's benefit in it, out with the kind of monetary benefit. I love it here. And then people that are spending money, they get much more than the veg box. You know, they get much more.
Compare coming here and picking it yourself and being part of sowing it yourself, and communicating with yourself, being part of this. There's a lock there, there's a farm cafe there. Compare that to the soulless experience of walking around Tesco with all the zombies of the world there, buying stuff from a soulless farm that's been squeezed to death at Tesco, and we're given that farm that difficult position by buying it off Tesco. You get a crappy contract, whereas you're dealing directly with the customers. The prices are not going to be a million miles away from the same as Tesco, probably even better.
Well, that's the feedback we had last year, that the value in the veg box was greater. We were throwing in extra stuff, and you know what it's like at certain times of the year, you'll have a glut. But they say that necessity is the mother of invention, and I think that these type of farms and these type of projects, we are going to see a lot more of them, because the thing that we're going to need to get out of this is a real community. We need communities to come together, and we're going to need food. So we've been forced into this.
It's not a bad thing. This is the way we used to live anyway. People would have these garden plots and things like that.
That's one of the great things about when you get a volunteer in who's of a certain age, the nostalgia that they've got around growing food, like rhubarb and the smell of the herbs. This is something that we've lost, but there's people alive today that remember all the fresh local produce that was just standard. There are alive today that remember that, so it's wonderful when they come to the garden and get their memory banks, going.
And I had an interview last night with one of the girls, Sarah, from Awakening Education. And it's very, very interesting. It takes you back to that question. We're educating them, but what is it we're teaching them? We're not teaching them how to grow food at school. There's no classes on that. Why not? That's very important.
No, without a doubt, and I do believe that on sites like these, you can learn about growing food, Steve, but also your numeracy skills and your literary skills. For example, on a harvest day, if I've got 60 veg box customers and all of them have to get 300 grams of salad mix, you need to get a calculator. 60 times 300 grams, convert it into kilograms, harvest it, weigh it, and then divide it up. So if a volunteer's going through that task, especially a young person, the confidence they get from it isn't just the technique of harvesting the lettuce, but the fact that they could be able to distribute and allocate 60 people's food And it's that type of experience.
But it's that, Andy, like what you said there sounded like a arithmetic question in a kid. So if you had 60 customers to feed and I bet 60 vegetables, what would you?
That's
You
it.
get your calculator, but you're never going near a vegetable.
That's it.
Whereas here you're doing it for real.
That's it.
You know, and that's the difference, and that's what I think's missing.
I don't.
So Andy, yeah, so that's it's a very, very a nice place that you've got there. It's got a real
No,
good
thanks,
feel
Steve.
about it. You've done a great job with it, and I can see that could be an abundance of food and a great experience for people. And that was the point I was making there. Compare that experience to going to Tesco. The Tesco and Asda and Morrison's and Sainsbury's, they've all got these fruit and veg aisles, you know, and you're lucky if you can get some organic stuff there now, but you're paying an absolute fortune for it. But who gets squeezed to get it there? Is it as organic as you think? Can we really trust these people? Do we want to give them their money? And what was the experience like of walking around Tesco and buying this stuff when we've got farmers markets or market gardens?
Yeah.
And I think if there was more places like yours, Andy, and we mentioned this in that video, and as I said, I'll link that video there because I'd like people to watch that. That I think a lot of people in this no job situation, they might just say, okay, faced with that choice, then the answer is no job, you know, and maybe they weren't meant for that job anyway, and maybe they're meant to be doing something else.
Yeah.
They might be an amateur gardener and love to be a real guy, you know. They might not, Andy, you're not wanting to make a fortune. You just want a living wage to be able to feed people. I know you're doing this more to put food on other people's tables than you are to put it on your own in many ways.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people like that. So can you sort of go through some of the background? Let's take it right back. How did you get into all of this, and where did it start from? And you know, how did you end up with such green fingers?
Well, it's a bit of a surprise to me, Steve. My dad was a gardener for years. He never grew food so much, but flowers. And in my early years, I remember him asking me to come out, give him a wee hand, and he was always out in the garden, and he always done a fantastic job. I remember all the compliments he used to get from neighbours and all that, but I never took him up on it when he asked me. I had to go travelling in order to get the kind of the bug for growing. I was in Australia at that time. I was about 26, and I'd been over in Australia for a short time, and I'd been working, so I could then afford to move into a different flat, a nicer flat than the one I moved into when I first went over. And I moved in with a guy called Lance Lieber. He was an Australian man in Bondi, and when I moved in with him, it was one of those meetings that was meant to be, Steve. You know, you meet people at certain times in your life and your life takes a different direction. And I knew as soon as I stepped into his house that this was one of those meetings. He'd plants all over the place, he'd books all over, DVDs. And it turned out he was actually leading the sustainable growing drive in Bondi, Sydney. So it was a bit of a miraculous thing to move in with him. But after that, everything changed. You know, I was going down to Bondi community dinner once a week. I was spending time in the community garden. I was involved in all different types of initiatives in Sydney, and it was a beautiful experience. But it was really, to summarise it, it was something that happened to me, Steve. It was call it the universe, call it whatever. It was something that happened to me, but.
And a good place to get into that, Australia. I mean, it's such a lovely country. I mean, I'd imagine you had a great time there.
Oh, it was fantastic. I mean, I was 26. My weekly routine consisted of surfing, out jogging down the beach, going out. I was working as a football coach. They call it soccer, a soccer coach at that time. I had a good life, and then everything was changing.
You've got that sort of Robbie Williams look about you, so that you'd have been a popular man over there as well. I'd imagine you would have been, you know, your football training, young.
Robin Williams. Robbie Williams.
What's his name? The Robbie. What's the guy who's a singer?
Robbie Williams. Aye.
Robbie Williams, aye. I was thinking I look a bit like Robbie Coltrane or something, and you look a bit like Robbie Williams. No, but again, so you've got the world at your feet, and then you stumble across this guy who gets you involved, and what did they call it? Was it organic gardening then, or what did they
Aye,
actually call it?
organic. Well, he was more into permaculture, so Lance used to run permaculture courses. So he used to
And
travel.
what is permaculture? What just for the benefit of the viewers, what is permaculture?
To summarise it, is working with the same principles in nature. So you're not doing artificial fertilizers, pesticides. You're working with nature. You're working with the materials, and permaculture is all about systems. So it's all about planning a site. So you would look at it and take a permaculture approach, and you would work out where your compost bin is going to be. If you've got chickens, where are your chickens going, and why? Why would you have your chickens there? And it's really a design approach to gardening, which takes in the principles of nature. So it's great, but in terms of permaculture principles, they don't always translate into the commercial growing. Commercial growing, not that we use pesticides or anything like that, but some of the techniques that you use in commercial growing is about getting food in the grounds and getting out very quickly because you're growing it to sell it. Permaculture will take on a bit of a longer approach and a more natural approach, and sometimes there is a bit of a conflict between commercial growing and permaculture. But that was a great experience for Lance. And what happened, Steve, is I came back to Glasgow, and I tell you what a contrast coming back from Bondi, Sydney, back to Tollcross in the East End, and just appreciate how different it was. I mean, the difference in people's health, the difference in terms of what was on offer at the high street. So I began to look.
They're very healthy in Australia. When you walk down, places like Manly or Bondi, and you see, maybe older people. I'm saying older, I'm getting there myself. You get people, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, couple of pals walking down, we beach walk, then I go to a cafe. Different world. And then you look, are the 75-year-olds in Glasgow or Liverpool or Manchester doing those same walks,
Exactly. The different
I mean, they've got the weather and things, but they do seem to be a wee bit fitter and healthier. I think they make a bit more effort, and I think we could with what we eat and what we do, and that sort of mind, body, and soul.
Without a doubt, and just with the setup there in terms of what was available in terms of access to fresh produce was so different that when I came back, I felt a bit frustrated. I felt, I wanted to have those experiences, but there wasn't as much going on. And I sat down and had a wee think about it, and then I started to look into how to draft a business plan. This was all new for me. And I looked into how many commercial growers there were in Glasgow. Glasgow, a population of, call it a million people, excuse me.
People, yeah.
The different catchment areas. And there was one company doing it in the south side of Glasgow called Locavore. And that's when I realised, what an opportunity there is. There's a million people and there's one company doing it. And if I was to set up an urban growing project, an urban market garden, I would be the second in Glasgow. And I just saw then that there was such a huge potential. And I went round to different housing associations and the different MPs that I knew in the area, and spoke to them and asked them, because I was in the same position a lot of people will be in who are watching this right now. Would they think, what's the first steps? How would I do that? How do I get access to land? And I started the conversation and went to the first housing association, Parkhead Housing, and it was very much a case of, it was almost as if they were waiting for someone to come and say, look, I want to do this, I want to take it forward. And that was 3 years ago now, so we've been established for 3 years.
What did you get there, an allotment?
It was access to a tenth of an acre, and it was imagine a jumping ground, burnt out mattresses, Buckfast bottles, nappies, weeds, you name it. And it was an area that young people gathered to drink and set stuff on fire. So when Parkhead Housing took me around to look at it, I thought, great, what a space, but what a lot of work. But what we managed to do there was to turn an area that was a site for antisocial behaviour and completely transform it into a space which was generating positive outcomes for the local community. So,
Brilliant.
no.
That's amazing, Andy, and it just shows you, it doesn't matter what the place is like. You can, it's like you're making magic. You're turning something that's not in a good state of repair into something positive, as you say. And I bet you the people in the area loved to see that eyesore turning into something like that.
Steve, to give you more detail on that space, it's behind a row of tenements. So the tenements looked out onto it, and we used to get people coming out, especially when it was starting to take shape and the beds were shaped, and when we started to put produce in the ground. The amount of people that come over the fence to say, "Listen, I think what you guys are doing here is absolutely amazing," and then I'd follow that up and say, "Well, do you want some salad?" No, 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 you're all right. I've just come over here. You know?
And they want
So,
some fried sausages or something.
aye,
Um,
aye.
Yeah, so that's I mean that's I didn't know that about that little story there, Andy. And you from that particular site, is that where you created some of the organic food that went into the Michelin star restaurants? So was that
That
another
was it.
allotment?
No, that was the site. That was how we started. That was the very first thing we did, and the next step after that, securing the land, was working out what we were going to grow and pricing structure. And then once we had a price sheet, we went into Glasgow. Me and my business partner at that time, Max Johnson, and we went into Glasgow and went round all the kind of high end restaurant. I always remember it being dead nervous, going in like that and what to say, and I had my script in my head. And it really was a case of them waiting for me to stop speaking so that they could say yes. It was like,
Yeah, because
I
they
don't,
didn't have the choices either. So
yeah, it's a
for them it
no-brainer.
was
That's what they said. They're like, sorry, you're growing this, 2 miles away, and you'll deliver it here. And
yeah.
it was very much like that. And I would say that's still the case now, where there is a shortage. There's more of a demand than there is a supply. So anyone watching this and thinking, but then again, Steve, we don't know what shape the cafes and restaurants will be in very soon. So,
Well, this is where we're going, Andy. It's like you get this petrol situation just now, and how dependent are we on these people? These people who are running the world this way just now, we're actually going to rely on them for our food.
aye, I know.
You know, with all the coercion and all the things that go on, and we're going to let them put food on the table for us and our families. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, Andy, is in the past 1950s and that kind of era, something like 40% of all Britain's foods came from the gardens of the people of Britain. Neighbours maybe sharing, somebody was good at one type of food and somebody was good at another, and they'd all swap and share and barter and trade with each other. But a lot of it they grew for themselves, and they were doing quite a good job. And the supermarkets wouldn't have been that well structured then either. How do we get back to that? And there's some of the viewers are going to be asking some questions, Andy, as well. So we'll flash some of them up as we go. We'll try and answer them as we go if we can.
Okay.
But again, we don't want to get dragged too much into quite long situations. But there's one there, and this resonates with me, Andy, because when we chatted at your market garden in Fife, I said, okay, so if we want to get good at this next year, because I'm a sort of businessman, Andy. I hate to see waste. Like I don't like seeing waste, and I also am a guy who trains people. So I train people not to waste opportunities in sales. So I'd rather train them to sell well, so that they don't speak to someone and drop the ball. It's like you saying there, you were going in to see restaurants and you were worried about what you were going to say, but they wanted to buy what you were selling. That's not always the case. Sometimes the salesman has to be really confident and sell it well and position all the benefits, and then ultimately the person buys it because it's been well positioned. It's just good customer service. So I like to get people ready to do things properly so as they don't waste opportunities. Now, I wasted a wee opportunity. I bought some raised planters. I've told you about this a couple of times, but I'm in for 350 quid, and I think I've got about 6 strawberries out of it, But there was more there, but I wasted some of it because I didn't harvest at the right time, or I didn't water enough, or I watered too much. And a couple of things at first I thought I've struck gold here, and everything was looking brilliant. I should have got some photos. Everything was looking brilliant. I had carrots, I had strawberries. I can't remember what else I had. Kale, wild kale, which looked
Right.
curly kale. Curly kale looked amazing. And then all of a sudden, slowly but surely, something started going wrong. The carrots started going a bit, and then the kale started, and then I didn't cut it up and harvest it. So, long story short, there's mistakes to be made.
Yeah.
I don't think we've got time to learn the hard way here. I don't think
Mm.
we've got time to make mistakes. So the idea of this type of meeting and others like it is to
Yeah.
say, can we tap into people like yourself and others like you and find ways to get the best of what you've got so as we can learn from your mistakes? You've been doing this, what, 7, 8, 10 years?
It's, wait a minute, 34. Oh, I feel old. 7 years, aye. 7 years.
7 years. So it would take me 7 years if I'm lucky to get to what you've learned. It would probably take me 20 years, Andy. Right?
Mm.
So how do I get some of the benefit of that sooner? So there's a viewer asking a question. I'm
Okay.
thinking of making a grow your own plot in the communal garden in London. Do you have any advice about starting one at this time of year? Now, you did mention to me, Andy, that this time of year is important. If you're planning for next year, you need to start thinking about it now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Matt. Is that in some ways it's a perfect time? I mean, what I'm doing at the site in Fife just now is all the work that I'm doing and that you saw me doing last time you were through, Steve. That's all for next year. That's all so that when I start sowing seeds in February next year in the polytunnel or sown out directly late March, early April, everything I'm doing now is 6 months in advance, and I'm preparing the
Yeah.
soil and I'm making sure that everything's in hand. Let me have a closer look at this question. Grow your own plot in a communal garden in London. Any advice about starting one at this time of year? I'm taking from that question that the communal garden appears to be set up. So I would imagine the infrastructure is in place. But if it's not, I would say you need to focus on the soil. You need to make sure that you've got good soil in, ideally manure. Even if it's not well rotted manure, there's enough time for it to rot over the winter. But I would start with that, getting your soil in. But I'm taking it, Steve, that the communal garden's already set up. So things like water supply will already be there, road access, communal areas. So I would say in terms of the site itself, focus on the soil. Get an idea as well. If you're going to have communities come in there and they're going to be growing their own, how much space does each person have? You know, how many people are you going to have in there? So, how many people can you have with the space that you've got? And what would actually be a justifiable portion of land for each person so that they get a good experience out of it? So, I'd be asking those type of questions, but it's a perfect time to be doing that. It's late September, October, and all the work that's going to be done over the next 3 to 4 months will stand that person in good stead. But to do more justice to that answer, I would need to know a wee bit more details as to
Aye.
where we're at, and but it does seem as if it's set up, which is a good thing. So,
Okay.
um,
Well, this is another question that I think. So, looking to grow a vegetable garden in my back garden and looking for advice. I think this is like most people could have access to this. And I posted a meme the other day, or a little meme, and it said we should have more gardens like this and
yeah,
less like this. And it was like one of them was just a lawn, just with
mm,
grass on it, and the other one was jam packed, same house, jam packed
yeah,
with vegetables. And everybody loved that meme. So in deep down, we're all gardeners. We'd all love to do it, but we think it's too big an investment. We think we don't know enough about it. We think we're going to make mistakes.
mm,
How do people get going? What would you recommend to get going in your garden with minimum errors and maximum
right.
output?
I think planning is such an important thing, Steve. I think it goes back to what we were saying about permaculture, and I was really fortunate that the person who inspired me with growing was a guy that could teach permaculture, and he could actually administer certificates and qualifications in it. And that really taught me about design and planning. And what I would do with it, with a back garden is, first of all, I would measure it. I would get an idea of the area, just how much growing space do I have, and then I would start to do drawings. I would sit and I would get an A4 sheet, do a drawing, and then within that, you would position where you want your beds to go. In terms of bed size, what I would recommend is a bed that's 2.5 feet wide, which is 30 inches. And the reason for that is that, you see sometimes up the allotment some crazy beds where it's like maybe 6 foot by 6 foot. And I always think that's amazing because how are you going to get to the middle of that bed without standing on the soil? So things like that, I would go for beds that are 2.5 feet wide and make them as long as they can go. But I would start with a drawing, sit down, work out where your beds are going to go, and then something to take into consideration because every back garden is different, and you need to take this into consideration in your planning. Is the shading? Is your back garden constantly in shade, or is it south facing? So you need to have a close look at it, and somebody'd be able to tell you, it gets a lot of sun, but I would advise each person to get a closer look at it because there'll be portions of the garden which will have more shade than others. So they'll be better for things like rhubarb or some herbs which prefer more shade. And I can see that somebody else has put a question on there about I've never got past the issue of veggies bolting. So when vegetables are bolting, it's because they've got too much sun and not enough water. They're under stress. They want to reproduce because they think they're dying. So they'll bolt and they'll go to flower. So shading is such an important thing to look at. But that would be my first two steps. Do a drawing and get a good understanding of what space you have, how much sunlight do you have, how much bed space can you actually create. And then once you've done that and you've worked it out, then it comes back to the soil. And is your soil quality actually any good? You can get a soil test, a pretty standard one. You don't need to pay for one the same way I would do. That's what I would advise. Unless you're in a heavily industrial area, it might be worth checking for any toxins. And you can pay to get a soil profile done. You would take samples and send them away. But if you're in a back garden and you're getting soil in, I wouldn't say that that's necessary. Get yourself a wee soil test. You can get it down at Tesco and get a good idea of what the pH levels is. Is it alkaline? Is it acidic? And then get yourself some compost. If you're starting it from scratch, I wouldn't go to B&Q and buy the bags. I would go for ton bags. So, but again, you can work all this out. And a great tip to get, and this really helps people, work out your bed size, work out how much area you've got, and then see when you go to these guys which sell compost, tell them exactly what you've got. Just say, look, I've got these amount of beds, they're 2.5 feet wide, they're 20 feet long, and I've got 4 of them. How much soil, how much ton bags would I require if I'm looking for 2 inches of soil? And this is what these guys do for a living. So you don't need to have all the answers. If you're buying compost, work out your area, then speak to the guy that's selling you, and then he'll do the work for you. So that would be it. Bed size, drawing, shading, and then get your soil in and take it from there.
Andy, is there any, because obviously we're not going to get 7 years of knowledge in a wee 1 hour video tonight because we're just, and again, there's a lot of trial and error and, getting out there. I mean, but you and I have chatted about maybe try to find a way for you to produce content or resources that people can type of information. But is there any sort of websites or magazines or anything that you recommend that would be good for your sort of beginner?
Aye, without a doubt. I mean, there's two individuals, in fact, three individuals that I would point people towards. The first one and my first choice would be Curtis Stone. Curtis Stone is the urban farmer, and he's based in Canada. He's based in Vancouver. This guy's been doing it for about, I think about 15, 20 years, and all of his content is online. So when I first started, he's got all the videos about how to do a price sheet and how to speak to chefs when you go into restaurants. I used to watch him not too long ago as a completely new beginner, and he's absolutely...
What's he called? The Urban Gardener?
The Urban Farmer, Curtis Stone.
Urban Farmer.
Curtis Stone. And then the great thing is that he's got a book and it's called The Urban Farmer. And this book is absolutely fantastic because what it does is it takes the reader from the position that they're at, which is no experience, wanting to grow lots of food, but not having the skills to do it. And within that, it takes you through all the steps. So developing your site, working out your area, working out what crops you want to grow, identifying the market. So it's very much for a commercial grower. So anyone that's watching this and thinks, I'd maybe like to try my hand at this, not just to provide my family some food, but perhaps as a business. he would be the great first step. And also in that, he's got all the information on the crops that he's been growing for years. And because he uses the 2.5 foot wide bed size, if you were to adopt that, you can look at the information on this book and you can work out, once you've got your drawing and once you've got the area of your bed, you can actually quantify how much crop you can get from your back garden as well. So I'd really recommend Curtis Stone. Another one is Jean-Martin Fortier, and he's also from Canada. He's from Quebec. He's French Canadian, and he's got a book called The Market Gardener, which again is for anybody that's looking to become a market gardener. But the books are fantastic. The online content is very accessible, and I think if you were to start looking at these guys, especially at this time of year, you'd be surprised by how much you can pick up. So that when it comes to February, March, and you're out in the garden, you'll have amassed a fair amount of knowledge. So, aye. But if I was to produce content online, it would be following their example, Steve.
Yeah, and that's that book there, Andy, the Market Gardener. So, again, another book that people can buy. Okay, so if you want to bookmark that, guys, that's another little opportunity and another wee tip for you. Some winter reading.
Yeah.
Andy, what we'll look at, I mean, there's more questions there, and we're going to try and get through as many of them as we can. But just to keep on track with that, right now, you have managed, and we're going to talk, if it's okay with you, you're an honest guy and you're very upfront and you're helpful and you're trying to help people here. You rented some land, haven't you? So you've actually rented some land as opposed to buying it. Now, that makes a big difference. What would be the commercial value of the land if you were to have bought that, do you think?
I'm not sure. It's not something I've ever. I mean, I was looking at different options at that time, and there was an option for 5 acres of land somewhere near Livingston, and that was about £25,000. But each area would be different depending on the
But not fortunes, though, isn't it? Really, I mean, don't get me wrong. Nobody's sitting on big pots of gold here, but this is back to this no jab, no job. Someone getting made redundant. Stick your job up your bum. I'm not interested. I'm walking out the door. Give me my money. Maybe then, investing in your own garden or buying something or renting something similar to you. So you've got like a sort of rental there. Not paying fortunes for that, Andy. Would it be similar to like renting out?
I know we spoke about transparency earlier, and I'm not going to hold any information back. I'm paying £1,000 a year for that lease, but it's going to be reviewed at the end of this year because that is very cheap. That is
very cheap indeed.
So for £1,000,
but that's true. So think about that. There's two things you've done, Andy. You turned a bit of wasteland that was all covered in dirty beds and nappies and all sorts of crap and a drinking den for kids. You turned that into a garden.
Yeah.
And then you've taken which is basically an acre or something. Is it an acre there? Yeah, an acre of land that you've managed to pick up cheap. You're driving to it. You're getting there, but you're camping out there and staying over and loving it some days as well. So it's a nice part of the world where you are as well.
Yeah.
But that's much, much cheaper than I thought. So these deals must be out there. There's all sorts of farmers who'd give you a bit of their land just to get rid of a field.
Without a doubt. I mean, the farmer in question out in Fife, he's really happy. I mean, he is a farmer, but he makes his money from the different leases that he has there. But he was really happy to know that there'll be a food supply close to him. And I'd imagine that there'd be a lot of farmers out there as well who, might have been growing certain crops which are no longer needed. There's certain things coming through in sustainable development where farmers that were raising cattle and things like that, meat production, they look to be less than in that, courtesy of the United Nations. So I would say that in terms of land and opportunity, there's perhaps more opportunity than there ever has been because we are going through such a transition. So it's dark and it's a wee bit scary and we're going to have to walk down this dark road, but there are opportunities.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's another wee question there that someone's asked, which I think is quite important. How do you keep pests away without using toxic sprays?
Aye, well, I mean, the first thing to say to that is that a healthy plant will be able to resist pests. You know, plants have got their own natural defences. So if you're planting into a healthy soil, you're looking after it, then they should be able to withstand pests. But in terms of, for example, in a greenhouse, tomatoes, that's a big one where you'll get green fly, something that we're perhaps all familiar with. A good way to get rid of them without toxins is to put a garlic clove inside a bottle of water and just let it rot down. And what will happen is it will go a horrible, horrible smell, and it actually goes a wee bit sticky too, the consistency of it. But what you do is you put that in a spray bottle, and then you'll spray the plant with that. Spray on the underside of the leaves. So if you take, there's a camera here. So if you take the plant here and pull the leaves up, and then you're spraying up under the leaves here. And what that will do is it will provide a massive deterrent for green fly and also slugs as well, because they detest the smell of garlic. So I use that. I use that in my tomatoes. I use that in my cucumbers, courgettes, things that slugs and pests really like. In terms of more outside, a big thing is slugs. You hear about a lot of different methods, eggshells and things like that. You hear about copper wire going round a raised bed. The slugs can't go over the copper wire. There's any number of methods, but I do use the organic slug pellets. I find them quite reasonable. I don't use too much of them. I use them quite sparingly. I'll use them at the start, but once the plant's established, I'll be able to withstand the slugs. But in a kind of healthy garden, you shouldn't be worrying too much about spraying, pesticides and all that with organic gardening. I think it's a bit of a misperception. A lot of people think, well, if you're not spraying, things are just going to get eaten. I don't necessarily think that's the case. There's a variety of methods, but the go-to for me would be organic slug pellets outside, inside your greenhouse. Utilize the garlic and the spray, because that will cost you nothing. It's an
Yeah.
organic method. It will cost you absolutely nothing, and you can tell your friends about it as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea, and the cheaper the better. Actually, you don't want to be spending money, and the natural ways are the best, aren't they? When you look back at all
Yeah.
you know, all the stuff your granny used to do for a cold, or if you're sick, yeah, all those things were better than any of the stuff that we're being offered now.
Aye.
If people
Yeah.
forget we've got immune systems, sometimes we have to get our immune system at the end of a needle,
Yeah.
don't we, Andy? We don't want some of that stuff happening. Um,
Yeah.
so again, it's a wee bit more back to the natural way we used to be,
Yeah.
isn't it? This
Yeah.
is the way we've lost these skills, maybe by design, Andy. I don't know. Maybe they've purposely over the last few generations. You take you take your generation apart for you, but you take mine. I don't think we're particularly green-fingered generation. My
Yeah.
generation. Um, the next generation, my son, 22. I don't think he would have a clue.
Yeah.
So when do we teach them? Where do we learn? But we've got a very good reason to learn now.
Yeah.
You might not have been thinking before, but I don't want to be dependent on these people, Andy. I'd give up everything now and have a farm. If I could have a farm that fed me and my family and some other people as well, and that was it, and I didn't have much else coming in, I think I'd just be happy enough with that. That would actually work for me. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Without a
and I
doubt.
think a lot of people would just be happy enough with that. Just let me get on with my life and food, you know, and we just do it. So I don't want to be dependent on these people anymore, not for 1 second longer than we need to. And it's why we've done this Awaken Pages to get away from it and to
Yeah.
withdraw our support and to open up these channels, Andy. Question I've got, and I saw someone else asking this question as well about planters. I can't find it now, but somebody asked a question about planters. Got it. Yeah. Um, why would someone with a garden choose planters, Andy, over just beds straight into
Aye.
the lawn? What would be the thought process there?
Well, I think I don't like using the planters or using wood which is low down. I don't see the point in it, but also I think there's actually drawbacks to that. Where I would use planters and where I would use woods and raised beds is if I was in a community garden setting where you're going to be attracting older people. who perhaps have mobility issues, going down to the ground and kneeling down. If you've got something set up so that the bed itself is at waist height, so you're not having to stretch and strain, perhaps you are at that age where you don't want to be going up and down,
Are you
then
talking
that's
to me
fine.
here, Andy? Is that to me you're talking?
No,
Aye.
but in terms of kind of that approach, I would definitely get planters in, and it looks good as well. But if you're fit enough to get down to the grounds, I wouldn't. Invest in wood. I think it would cost money, and it doesn't have
That's quite
to.
expensive. I can vouch for that, Andy. I spent something like 350 quid on 3 planters. You
Aye,
know, so it's a big initial outlay. And don't get me wrong, they look good, but they're just not produced for me. You know, I'd
aye,
like, but I think maybe next year with your help, I'm going to get you up here and you can help me.
aye.
So
No, without a doubt, and the ones on the ground as well. I find that slugs love that. They love to go under these bits of wood, and they'll wait there. They'll hide under there during the day, and then they'll come out at night. And what you want to do as much as you can is not provide slugs a place where they can hide and where they can stay. So, as much as possible, I would go straight into the beds. And again, I would refer people to the Jean Martin Fortier book or the Curtis Stone book. They speak a lot about this. Just having a small path, 2.5 feet wide bed, half a foot path. And if you were to do that as well, you're going to utilise the full space of your garden, because having big clumpy bits of wood lying about, and then I'd say focus on getting it straight into the ground as much as possible if you can.
and again, we're not going to. I mean, we're not going to learn to be expert gardeners tonight. But what we're really looking at here is the will there to do it? You know, are we in the market to do this, guys? Are we going to turn our gardens into food
Yeah,
production systems next year? Are we going to get out there and hire allotments, buy some land off someone, hire some land off someone, borrow some land off someone? You know,
yeah,
do a deal with someone. I'll do X, and you give me that land, and I'll
yeah,
turn it into food, and I'll give you some of it. You know, we need to
mm,
get quite creative, but the will is there, Andy. I think people
yeah,
want this now. I think we've never been more ready, and I think we need to start really seriously thinking about
mm,
this and
yeah,
getting on with it. Um, so, from your point of view, Andy, you've got an opportunity to feed from this 1 acre 60, 60 people a week. Is that right? And we're talking about
aye.
a £15 or something box.
Aye. Well, initially 60. That's what I'm going to go for in the first year. That's what I've forecast for, because I know without a doubt I'll be able to do 60. Perhaps in the course of the season that will jump up a little bit. Certainly next
Mm-hmm.
year I'll be doing more than 60. There is space to do that, but this year coming, I'm going to go for 60. And that'll be enough for me the first year.
And you're looking at 60 boxes that you might sell for 15 a week. You know, it's maybe 900 quid a week or something like that. Obviously, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of cost there as well, but you're still getting by, aren't you? You know, you've got an income there coming in, and you're not, you know, as a business opportunity, if someone were to lose their job or decide to say that my principles are worth more than this crappy job I'm in and I'm
Yeah,
not enjoying it, you know, that there's maybe options out there that might be more satisfying and rewarding and
yeah,
secure for your family, you know. So I like the fact that it's not costing you a fortune. I like the fact that you can create enough food. But again, people need to learn how to do what you're doing. But I
mm,
think that the appetite to learn is there, and that I think we're faster learners. Necessity is the mother of invention. You said so in that little video, and I think that's the
mm,
case now.
mm.
We don't have any choice. We're probably going to have to get good at this kind of stuff, and
True.
so we should. Uh, Someone else asked this question. So, what about weeds, especially the rhizomus one if they're planted directly in the ground? Horsetail, creeping thistle, creeping buttercup, and various others.
Aye, I mean you're going to experience challenges, and especially at certain times of the year, you're going to experience certain weed pressure. What I would say is, when you take on a site and when you're looking at an area for the first time, you do need to have an idea of what weeds are in there, especially in that initial stage. I mean, if I'm going in with a rotavator, for example, I'm not going straight in with a rotavator, because then what I'm going to do with things like horsetail, and especially creeping buttercup, is all I'm going to do is cut it into a million other pieces and really actually set myself back to the extent that I might ruin the site. So you would assess it. And a good way of doing that again is work out your area and then divide into sections. And then what I would do is with each weed, with each type of weed, allocate it a number. And then you would put wee flags out and then put the flag where the weed is, and then step back from it, and then you've got an idea of how much weeds you have. If it's incredibly weedy, you perhaps don't want to have that as a growing site, and in that case, then raised beds would be better. But I wouldn't be put off entirely. Have a look at it and assess it. If it's incredibly weedy, you might have to spend a bit of time getting that out, or perhaps choosing a different site. But I would still lean towards not using the raised beds in the first instance, if possible. But the person here makes a valid point. I just feel that leaning towards the straight into the ground approach is cheaper, is more effective. You're going to have more space, and then also if you've got a planter and it's dry, because a planter's contained and it's above the ground, it dries out quicker. You're going to have to water it more. It perhaps needs a bit more attention. When that wood rots, you're going to have to replace it. So I just find it much more hassle-free to go straight into the ground. But the individual's right to flag that. If there's too many weeds, particularly of a certain kind, then planters may be a better option. That is true.
Andy, what about winter growing? I mean, I think we're all committed. Next year, we're going to be doing a bit of gardening. We're going to get organised here. We're going to be buying off farmers markets and local gardeners who are doing what you're doing, if they're better than us at it. So next year, but you need to start now, as you said.
Yeah.
What would you recommend in terms of people? Can we grow anything over winter? Is there anything that grows in this country, particularly Scotland being pretty cold? What about the UK as a whole? Is there anything that grows all year round?
Well, no. I mean, eventually things will just stop growing. There isn't enough sunlight. There isn't enough photosynthesis, which is happening. So it's not actually going to grow. But what you can do is, if you're looking to have winter veg or winter salad, is you need to have it in the ground in advance. So what I have, if you imagine my crop planning schedule for the year, I'll have my spring, summer, and then as I'm moving into winter. You would think that the winter growing. I'm thinking about that in October, maybe November. No, that's in August. That's when I'm getting in my autumn variety carrots. That's when I'm getting in kind of more hardy winter salad like winter purslane. That's when I'm putting in my kale or my spinach. Things that are quite hardy. But you need to have that in the ground in August, maybe September at the latest, because even then the days are getting shorter. Things are growing less quick.
Yeah.
But the thing that keeps these crops
Is that
alive.
your last harvest then? That would be your last sort of harvest then, this last
No.
August plant? No?
No, that would be your last sowing, perhaps. Maybe September with certain things, maybe it's like rocket and mustard, kind of quick salads, you could get away with that in September. But your last harvest, if you do that, Steve, if I was to get that in the ground, enough of it, kale, spinach, things like that, maybe winter greens, cabbage, then I'll be harvesting that through the winter. But it's all about doing it in advance, because the thing that's keeping it alive in the winter time isn't what's happening above the ground. It's the root structure below the ground. If there's enough of that under the ground, which is isn't exposed to the cold, and it's going to stay alive, you will need to look at covers at one point. I'm tremendously fortunate in that I've got a huge polytunnel, and we're putting the skin on it on Friday, which is a really exciting thing. Friday's a volunteer day. If anybody watching this in the Fife area wants to come out and give a hand, the polytunnel skin is going on Friday. And that's a massive thing for me, Steve, because what that will do is it'll extend the season for me. It'll bring it forward in spring so that I can start earlier, and it'll extend it in November. But this time next year, I could be harvesting all the way through the year if I had things in there that were established, like the greens I've mentioned. But you can also do things like prepare things for the next year. So I was on site today, and I was looking at the beds, and I was thinking, why not get some garlic in? I could get some garlic in the ground, And because it's below the ground and it isn't going to be hit too much with the frost, it's just going to rest from now until next year. And then what I'll see in maybe late February, March next year is I'll see it starting to appear. So there are things that you can plant now to prepare for next year, and there are ways that you can be harvesting well into the winter, but you really need to give the plants the best opportunity to get established. And it's great. I mean, anything here that I'm saying that seems mysterious, it isn't. You know, there isn't too many obstacles here to learning. In fact, see if you go to the shop and you're looking at it, look at the seed packet. Look at the back of the seed packet. It will tell you when to get it in the ground. And then look at the guys that Jean Martin and Curtis Stone as well. And the good thing about those guys is that they're on the same latitude as ourselves, Canada, Vancouver. It isn't dramatically different from Scotland, so it's actually quite transferable, the knowledge they have. But that is the challenge in Scotland. That we mentioned Sydney earlier, and I know you've spent time over there yourself, Steve. They can grow all year round. It's wonderful in places like California. That's great. But in Scotland, we do have 4 seasons, and sadly, winter lasts about 6 months. So it is quite a short growing season that we have. But I wouldn't put people off. It's actually one of the exciting things to learn is the turnover between your summer crops and your winter crops. And that's a real challenge when you start is, you know, getting things in the ground for winter and summer so that it's ready. And that's when, you know, you're starting to come on a bit as a grower, because at that time you're watching the seasons and you're getting an idea of the profile of your crop and when it needs to be in. And you're starting to get that gardener's mentality where you're constantly thinking 6 months in advance. Well, these are all challenges, but that's the thing I love about the growing is that you learn about all the approaches. How do you overcome the challenge of 6 months of winter in Scotland? And there are ways to do it.
People are asking, Andy, there, it's quite an important question about, well, they've asked a question about this, greenhouses, but are greenhouses a good investment for people to make for their garden?
Without a doubt. There's a couple of things here. The greenhouse itself will ensure that you can grow earlier and later, but also if you're bringing on seedlings,
it's about like your polytunnel, isn't it? The greenhouse is just the polytunnel is for a larger version of a greenhouse for market gardens like yours.
But without a doubt, and also a really important thing that I use the polytunnel for, Steve, is propagation. So I will sow directly into a lot of the beds. I've got the earthway seeder, which is a tool that I use. If you imagine a small trolley with a plough on it, and I can direct sow into the beds, and that's great. But much of the time I go for transplants. So I'll sow seedlings in the polytunnel and they'll come on for a period of weeks, and then I'll plant them out. And what that does for me as a commercial grower is I want to guarantee that crop's going to actually make it to the chef, and that the funds from the chef are going to make it to my bank account. So I need to make sure that these transplants are really healthy and get in the ground, but I need a propagation area for that. So what I had last year in Parkhead, and I'll do the same this year, was my dad custom built me a propagation bench, 3 tiers on it, and I use that so that I can bring seedlings on and then plant them out. And that's something that people should be doing, and if they want to achieve higher levels of success, because as a first-time grower, if you're sowing out into the open outside in your garden, that isn't a controlled growing environment. You might get frost, you might get a sudden influx of rain, you might get lots of sun, you might get a dog or a fox or a cat in your garden. There's so many variables outside, but when you're growing in the greenhouse, you shut the door, the plants are in there, you can control the temperature to a certain extent, you control the amount of pests that are there, and you've got much higher levels of success, and then you plant them out at the appropriate time. So I would highly recommend a sizable greenhouse, enough that you can get a wee table in it and get your seedlings all ready. Because that's part of the fun, is you're not just always outside pouring rain. Get yourself in the polytunnel, put on some music, get your trays, fill them up with soil.
That's it. Having a bit of fun,
That's it, and you just switch off. It's great.
Yeah, I think that's going to be quite important, actually. And again, it's back to this spending money, investing. you're going to be in that, if you're where you're going to be and you're investing in the place and you're going to get your garden, maybe a greenhouse is not a bad. What would you be paying, Andy, for a sort of decent enough greenhouse, you reckon?
Oh, a decent greenhouse, I would say you'd be looking at maybe £1,000 to get a decent
Right.
one
Okay.
for, but that would be glass. I mean, I don't want to put anyone off. You could, I mean, you could actually look up videos on YouTube as to how to make one. You know, if you had a
Mhm.
proper industrial strength plastic, you could make one. So I don't want to put anyone off with that. Maybe you could get one in the £500 range, but um, aye,
But that's not. It's not, again. It seems like a decent, for the benefits that you get.
Aye, you'll make that back. You'll make that back. The money
Yeah.
that you'll save depends on the size of your garden, but that is a solid investment because it's going to ensure that your garden is going to be productive.
Well, that's the key, is being productive. So getting in with people who are productive. That's me and you, Andy, we're mates for life now, and I know somebody in the food game, and I can always get access to food. Uh,
Yeah.
but I want to learn as much as I can from you, Andy, about this stuff. I want to have a better season. I'm in my mind. I'm a lot of things, Andy. But in my mind, I am a farmer, right? But I'm
Mm,
not. Right, I'm the furthest thing away from a farmer you can
mm,
actually get, and I'm
yeah,
lazy and I can't be bothered. But I'd love to do it, and I'd love to make it work. I really would. And I think if I got good at it and I got some successes, I think I
mm,
would get
yeah,
motivated, and
yeah.
I would turn into something that I've not been my whole life. And I think it's time to become
I give it a
to get
go.
connected.
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's time for us all to get connected with that part of the ancient people that we used to be.
Mm,
Um, it's such an important skill, and I think they
mm,
should be teaching it to kids. And I think we just really need to get our acts together so that we're not dependent on these people out there who don't
yeah,
wish us any well, they wish us nothing but harm, let's put it that way.
yeah,
Yeah, so Andy, there's a million things that you and I could chat about. I'm glad we've got those books on the table. I'm going
yeah.
to put your Facebook page up there. I'm going to
Oh,
refer
thanks,
people
Steve.
to the other video that we've got, which is a longer half-hour video on site at Andy's place in Fife, and we talk at length about things there that people may find very, very important. We've covered, Andy, I think everything that I would want to cover tonight. Is there any sort of thoughts or questions or comments
Mm.
or tips that you'd like to give the viewers? Anything else that you think you'd like to pass on?
In terms of tips, no, I'd maybe just say some words of encouragement and talk about my own experience and every grower experience. We're going to make mistakes, you know, and we can learn and all that. And there is a bit of a situation just now where we need to be growing food, without a doubt. But I wouldn't want that to be any pressure on people because part of the fun of growing is making the mistakes, and I'm still making mistakes and learning how to do things better each year. So, it's a really exciting time to get going. It's necessary, but I would just like to maybe remove any of the pressure that people might feel that, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make mistakes. That's all part of the fun. Every season's different, the weather's different, your soil will improve, sometimes it'll deteriorate. Sometimes you get the seeds that you buy aren't the best quality as compared to the other thing. There's so many variables. So aye, give it a go. If people like yourself are feeling it, Steve, then there'll be a lot of people out there. And if anyone wants, the volunteer sessions at 5 are on a Friday between 10 and 2 p.m. You'll be more than welcome. And the contact details are on the Facebook for
And
people.
anybody can come there, Andy. And this is a good energy swap, isn't it? They're doing a bit of graft for you and doing a bit of digging, but they're learning what to dig and where to sow and what to do and why not to do certain things.
Yeah,
They're actually learning. So it's a good energy swap. You're getting a bit of free labour,
aye,
but they're getting something infinitely more valuable,
aye,
because they've
without a
got
doubt.
that experience, So
Aye,
and that's every Friday you invite volunteers in, and they can.
every
Do
Friday
they need
between.
do they need to phone you first?
No, no. I mean, just now. I mean, I had quite a few weeks ago. I had a 15, but that was because two families came. But I think just now I'm averaging between 6 and 8. So, if people wanted to come, you'd be welcome to send me a message ahead of time, and I'd be looking forward to receiving you. But it is a good exchange. I mean, this is standard practice with community grown projects and things like woofing. I'm not sure if you're aware of woofing, but the woofing network is set up throughout the world, and it's an arrangement that farmers and growing projects have with people who are passing through and want to learn how to grow. They put them up.
And
You
how
get
do you spell that, Andy?
Woofing, WOOFING, and it's the Woofing Society. But this is standard practice where people come into a growing project. Aye, they can volunteer, they can do it for nothing. You can progress into employment. That's what happened to myself. So there are pathways for that, and in fact, that's something that we'll be looking at for Green Heart Growers. Is if you stick in with us, you can go through a gardening course. We actually got a certified gardening course with REHIS, the Royal Environment of Health in Scotland. So we've got a certified growing qualification. So if you were to come along, there's a benefit in that, and that can provide you a path to employment.
It's all confidence building, isn't it, Andy? You know,
That's the
getting
biggest thing,
these things
aye.
under your belt.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But it's exciting times, for the growing and aye.
it is. Well, listen, thank you to everybody who asked some great questions there. That was one of the most questions, and there's millions of questions we never. So sorry that we never got to answer them all. There's only so much we can actually do. Tonight was more about whetting the appetite and saying, look, we're pretty serious about this, Andy, and here, this Awakened Pages, this awakened economy. The awakened economy is more than just buying off awakened businesses. It's becoming more dependent on yourself. We've got these energy swaps. We've got, the ability to turn our gardens into something productive, and I think people want to do it, and I think we want to stop spending money with these big corporations and start to create it ourselves. So there's lots of places we can go. I think these community gardens are everywhere. People could volunteer up and down the country, Andy, and it sounds like they'd be quite well received.
Aye, without a doubt. I mean, this culture's been established for a long time, where there is that exchange of labour for knowledge. And don't get me wrong. I mean, some volunteers will come, and sometimes volunteers take up your time, and that's fine. That's one of the pleasures of the job, is that I'm kind of stopping what I'm doing, and maybe the labour side of things isn't moving forward as quickly as I would like, but I'm taking the time and attention that the people deserve. If people do come to the site, pretty soon, Steve, they'll see it in its developmental stage.
It's Kinghorn, isn't it? Is it
Kinghorn? That's right, Kinghorn Fife, just at Craig and Carlett's farm. But if people interact with the space in the month of March and April, at that time it'll be established, and it will all be about growing crops, and the amount of knowledge that people get at that time will be fantastic. And the way we do it as well, we'll harvest, but I always sow 15% more than I need. I'll quantify it, I'll do my bed plan, I'll do my crop schedule, and I'll work it all out, and then I'll add 15% on. And what that allows me to do at that point is, one, if I've got too much, I can give it away. And in the East End last year, we were giving this to food banks, we were giving it to local churches, we we're giving it to local cafes, and that was the real social enterprise side of it. That was great, and then working out partnerships with people and dropping off at certain times. Also, if things don't go right, and there's been I don't know, a dry spell or whatever, things haven't germinated the way I would like, that's fine, because that extra 15% might tide me over. But what we also do is make food available to volunteers. We always harvest extra, and people go up the road and take food with them. So people get access to the knowledge, but they get access to the food as well, and the whole experience. So I can't talk about it highly enough. And the reason why I'm so enthusiastic about it is because it's something that happened to me, and I would love nothing more than if somebody came through to Fife and they had a wee bit of curiosity and they felt like they would do it. And because I would see in that person myself 7 years ago. So, aye.
I think a lot of people, well, you're looking at me now, Andy. I'm going to be a gardener in less than 7 years because I want to get things done faster. So, and I'm the furthest thing from being green fingered or a gardener that you could get. So I'm going to be a wee living experiment here, and I'll come over and we'll convince Jane to come over as well, and we'll do a wee shift in
Good,
your place, and
good.
we'll get involved. But listen, Andy, you've done well. You're doing great stuff in the protest side as well. Can I just say that?
No, thanks, Steve.
Everybody's been saying that to me as well about what you're doing. So you're very highly regarded. You're doing a good job, and I think everybody's very pleased to see. And you're non-stop graft, you guys, which is good to see as well. So it's nice. We need to be doing that. So I don't know when you get time to actually do any actual work, because you seem to be always out there on these roundabouts and out doing something. But you're back in the land of the living. You had a wee run-in with the cops recently, and you've managed to, they've taken the shackles off you, so you're free to fight that bit harder again, which is good. So
Well, I think because I wasn't able to access certain areas, it just meant I had to work in a different way. But the beautiful thing about that, Steve, was, Unite for Truth is we're a group, and there was other individuals within the group that were prepared to stand up and develop. And the good thing about our group is that we've got some young members, and it was absolutely thrilling to see people like Ashley Goldie and Lee Armit kind of stepping up and
doing some good work.
talking at Glasgow Green. I mean, that's what I did for years. I was manager of the YMCA in Tollcross for 5 years, and loved working with young people. I was a soccer coach before that and an English teacher before that. I've always worked with young people. So to see the guys in Unite for Truth step up in the time that I wasn't able to go to spaces, and that's what it's all about, because it's not about me and it's not about any one particular group. It's about everybody doing what they can and what they feel to be right. So it feels good. And I was in Glasgow the other day. I was able to take my mum out for something to eat, go and buy clothes and all that. So it's nice to be.
Had they banned you from Glasgow altogether?
From the city of Glasgow, and that was difficult because at that time I was supplying about 5 places in Glasgow,
Right.
cafes and round about Ingram Street and Denniston and places like that. But unfortunately, and I think that's the reason why they removed the bail conditions. That was one of the arguments, was that it was impacting my livelihood. And so I'm quite pleased. I don't feel that
Yeah,
it.
it's quite unfair, that. I think it's quite unfair what they did. So, but anyway, you're back in the land of the living, and I saw a good video of you marching through town the other day, which was good to see. So, yeah, all good. Yeah, but we're on the right tracks, Andy. There's a lot happening. We're pushing, all assets deployed, mate. We're pushing into every area that we can.
Yeah.
This Awaken Pages is a protest as well. We keep saying every pound is a protest pound. We're if we could get every awakened person buying off every awakened business, you'd be surprised how quickly these people would get a very strong message. Mate. It would be incredibly. It's an incredibly powerful economy. We are much stronger than we think, but we've got to pull together. We've got to make this magic happen. But these are all conversations that inches down that road. But time is of the essence, Andy. So we need to move very, very fast. Listen. Thank you to everybody who's taken part. Andy, you hang back and you and I will have a quick chat, but thank you to everybody, and thank you again, Andy, for doing all the work and for taking part tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. All right.
Thanks for the invite, Steve. I appreciate it.
Yeah, all the best. Thank you.